children. Bill, Ben and I have a few things in common. We like to have a laugh, and we like to play tricks on people. Don't we, lads? But sometimes, playing tricks on people can get you into trouble. As we're about to find out how in tonight's bedtime story, which is called Bill and Ben Balloon Tricks, and it's written by Chris Allen. It was a quiet morning in the garden, and Bill and Ben were wondering how to spend the day when Tad arrived looking worried. "Bill! Ben! Come quick! There's a wolf next door!" he cried. Ben was just about to reply, but he realised he didn't know what a wolf was. "Flobberdolf?" he asked Weed. "A wolf is a large, dangerous animal, Ben," explained Weed. "Flobber, lead the way," said Bill, as he and Ben climbed out of their flower pots and followed Tad to where the wolf was. "Please be careful," called Weed after them. Bill, Ben and Tad arrived at the fence and saw the wolf's tail sticking out of the hole that led to the garden next door. "Flobberdo?" asked Ben, wondering what they should do. "We've got to frighten it away, but who'll be brave enough?" asked Tad. Ben volunteered to chase the wolf away, so Tad said, "Good luck," and Ben ran through the fence as Bill covered his eyes, so he wouldn't have to see his brother getting possibly attacked. Just then, Tad started laughing, and Bill wanted to know why. At that moment, Ben came back through the fence, looking cross, and he and Bill realised that the wolf wasn't a wolf at all. It was just a piece of fur. "Flobber-dobber-lob," they said. Tad had played a trick on them. Sorry, lads. You see, I heard the children talking about a special day where everyone plays tricks. I thought, let's have that special day today. So I played a trick on you," said Tad, before he hopped through the fence to the garden next door. Just then, Bill had an idea. If it was a day for playing tricks, he and Ben could play tricks too. "Flobber to home," the flowerpot men whispered. They decided to play their first trick on Gnome, so they rushed to the shed to look for something to play their trick. Bill wanted to hang something on his fishing rod and trick Gnome into thinking he'd finally caught a big fish. Ben found a bootlace dangling from a shelf, so he pulled it down. But a boot fell on top of him. said Ben. "Flobber-dite, ha-ha," said Bill with delight. He thought the boot was the very thing, because they could tie to Gnome's rod with its laces. When Ben got the boot off himself, he and Bill took hold of the laces and pulled it to the edge of the workbench. But the boot was so heavy, it fell off the workbench, pulling Bill and Ben with it. Outside the shed, Ben came out pulling the boot alone, and it was very heavy. But he didn't know that Bill was inside the boot, making it heavy. Soon Ben couldn't go any further, and when he stopped, he heard Bill laughing from behind his back. "Oh, flubber Bill!" grumbled Ben, and he tipped the boot over to pay Bill back. "Oh, flubber Ben!" said Bill as he fell out of the boot. Once the flowerpot men took the boot to Gnome, Ben tied it to his fishing rod, while Bill told Gnome he'd caught a big fish. "Ooh, "Flabberdish!" said Ben, pretending to be fascinated that Gnome had indeed caught a big fish. The Flowerpot men started laughing, and they thought they had played a great trick. In fact, Bill and Ben thought their trick was so great that they wanted to play another one. Bill thought of a trick to play on Slowcoach, so he knocked on his door, and when Slowcoach came out of his house, Bill asked him if he would like to have a race with a hare. "Oh, yes, just to prove what a wise old story it was about the tortoise beating the hare," said Slowcoach. "Now, where is he?" Bill had even thought about how to use the fur that Tad had pretended was a wolf, and Ben arrived wearing it, disguising himself as a hare. "Flobber there!" said Bill, pointing to the hare. "Phew, it doesn't look a very lively hare," said Slowcoach as he looked at the hare. "Now, where shall we race?" "Flobberdine," said Bill, as he drew a line on the ground with a piece of white chalk 2 meters away from Slowcoach's house. "It's not very far. Still, let us begin," said Slowcoach. "Flob, flew, flee," counted Bill, and before Slowcoach could take one step, the hare ran across the finish line. "Ho-ho! Flobber winner!" said Bill, declaring the hare as the winner. "The winner? But I've hardly moved," said Slowcoach, who was very puzzled. Then Ben took off the fur, and he and Bill started laughing. "Ben, was that you, pretending to be a hare? Was this all a trick?" asked Slowcoach sternly. When Bill and Ben heard Slowcoach's question, they stopped laughing and nodded their heads. "It's not very nice to play tricks on friends who try to be kind to you," said Slowcoach, and he went back into his house feeling cross. Bill and Ben hadn't meant to upset Slowcoach, so perhaps they wouldn't play any more tricks just yet. Perhaps they could find something to do in the cellar, so Bill and Ben went there. Once they were in the cellar, the first thing Bill and Ben saw was a hot air balloon. "Oh, flubber this," said Ben, wondering what it was. Bill noticed that the string attached to the basket of the balloon was underneath a watering can. So he lifted the can off the string, and then the balloon started to fly up the cellar slide. "Oh, flub, said the Flowerpot men, and they grabbed hold of the string to stop the balloon from flying away. But the balloon didn't stop. It carried on flying up to the garden, taking Bill and Ben with it. When the Flowerpot men got back to the garden, they started to pull the balloon down. It was tricky at first, but eventually they got the balloon back on the ground. Bill and Ben noticed that there were all sorts of interesting things inside the basket, so they climbed in to take a look. But as they were looking, the balloon started to float into the sky. Now Bill and Ben were flying. Ooh, flobber flying, sighed Bill and Ben happily as the balloon flew peacefully in the sky. Just then, Ben saw Thistle. "Ooh, flobber thistle," he said to Bill, pointing down at Thistle. "Flobber flick," whispered Bill, who thought that he and Ben could play a trick on her. So Ben untied one of the sandbags from the basket and dropped it in front of Thistle, covering her in sand. "Oh, what's that? Help!" coughed Thistle. The Flowerpot men sniggered quietly as the balloon flew towards the shed. Bill found a horn and started blowing it. Then he decided to blow it to surprise people. First, Bill surprised Scamper and made her drop some nuts she had found. "Oh my goodness! What's that?" cried Scamper. Next, Bill surprised Boo and made him get stuck in Slowcoach's doorway. "Where did that come from?" groaned Boo. Then, Bill surprised Slowcoach, who was inside his house reading a book. "Oh my word! A call to arms! I've not heard such a sound since I was a young soldier tortoise!" cried Slowcoach. Then, when Bill blew the horn again, Slowcoach pushed Boo out of his doorway and came out wearing his old army helmet. "Attention!" cried Slowcoach, saluting to what he thought was the caller. But there was actually no one there. Bill and Ben were having the time of their lives, as no one had seen them in their balloon or knew that they were playing tricks. The balloon was now flying over next door's garden. Bill and Ben decided to get their own back on Tad. So Ben found a megaphone and croaked into it like a frog. "Oh no! A huge flying frog! It's after me!" cried Tad, and he jumped into his pond for cover. Next, Bill and Ben decided to play a trick on Rose, and Ben buzzed into the megaphone like a bee. "Ooh, a giant bee!" cried Rose when she heard the buzzing. As Bill and Ben were laughing, Bill found a pair of binoculars and saw a pry in her nest through them. "Flubber pry!" he said to Ben, who squawked into the megaphone like a bird. "It's Bill and Ben! Oh, they're flying!" said Pry when she saw the balloon, and she flew over to have a closer look. As the balloon was now flying above the clouds, Bill and Ben laughed some more, and then stopped when they felt something land on the balloon. The flower pot men looked up and saw Pry standing on the balloon. "Well, well, fancy you two being able to fly," she said. "Is this some sort of balloon?" "Flop," said Bill, nodding his head. But Ben quickly interrupted him because he had decided to play another trick on Pry. "Flubber Dollipop," he said. "Oh, a great big lollipop? I must have a taste," said Pry, as she flew off the balloon. Ben quickly realized that pretending the balloon was a lollipop was a big mistake, because when Pry flew off the balloon, she poked a hole in it. All the air came out, and then it started falling. "Ah!" cried Bill and Ben, as the balloon fell closer and closer towards the ground. The balloon landed close to Weed with a crash, and Bill, Ben, and all the things fell out of the basket. "What have you two been up to?" asked Weed in surprise, as the flower pot man walked over to her. "Have you been playing tricks again?" Bill and Ben glumly nodded their heads. "Aww. Tricks are all very well and no one gets hurt, you know. But sometimes tricks can hurt your friends. And sometimes tricks can hurt you," explained Weed. Bill and Ben climbed into their flower pots and were very sorry if their tricks had hurt anyone. But they remembered what fun they had flying in the balloon. So they went to sleep happily after all. Aww, I really love that story. Didn't you two? You two really did have a fun time flying in that balloon. And now you know that you can't play tricks all the time, because, as we'd said, sometimes tricks can hurt people. Just you remember that. Now it's time for you to grab your favorite teddy and get cuddled up in bed. I'll see you soon for another bedtime story. Good night.